In this session, we have Masdar, one of the three challenge sponsors, who will be sharing with us on their challenge statement that is seeking solutions to enhance its residents' comfort against severe outdoor climatic conditions in Abu Dhabi. Masdar is one of the world's most sustainable urban developments. It is home to the only planned and approved R&D cluster in Abu Dhabi and is the region's hub for some of the world's most innovative sustainable technologies. Comprising of a rapidly growing clean tech network, competitive business-free zone, and residential neighborhoods with uniquely designed public green spaces, Masdar is spearheading the innovations to realize a more sustainable future for all. In today's session, we have with us Mr. Chris Wan, Head of Design Management at Masdar, who will be sharing with us on the motivation behind their challenge statement, as well as the technicalities and desired outcome. Mr. Wan adopts a holistic approach to design in his current role at Masdar. He sets the roadmaps to creating sustainable buildings which optimize the balance between environmental, commercial, and social requirements. During the sharing, please do note that all attendees will be muted throughout the session. Should you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A panel at the bottom of your Zoom window. We will bring up the questions after the briefing. I'd like to now pass the time over to Mr. Chris Wan. Mr. Wan, please.
Thank you for the introduction. And today I'm going to do a presentation to talk about the innovation core for a project at Masdar City. Masdar City is one of the world's most sustainable urban community, a place where sustainability is a way of life. It is also a low carbon development where the city is rapidly growing clean energy clusters, business-free zone, residential neighborhood with shops, restaurants, and green open spaces. Masdar City is many things at the same time. Not only is it a place, but to Masdar, it is an ongoing project, working alongside with the clean energy team within the Masdar organization. It is also an economic free zone. It offers its tenants 100% foreign ownership on their UAE-based companies, no restrictions on capital movements, profits or quotas, a favorable tax environment. It is a home to more than 800 local and international companies already. Furthermore, it is also an investment zone where investors can own property freehold. And last but not least, Masdar is a 100% owned subsidiary of the Masdar investment company. Masdar City is located within Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. Specifically, it is just east of the main Abu Dhabi island and very close to the Abu Dhabi International Airport. Masdar City concentrates on being a sustainable community and also a mixed-use community. In this community, we promote the ideas of living, working, and playing. The buildings within Masdar City come together to produce one of the world's largest clusters of sustainable buildings. Building certification, including SD and LEED, applies to all the buildings, and they're all working together cheek and jowl. At the same time, Masdar City is pioneering real-world solutions where we are looking at efficiencies in energy, water, waste, and mobility. This is an aerial view of an artist's impression of the final build-out of Masdar City. As you can see, there is some road-specific characteristics here, not least being the density that comes with a sustainable approach to a living community. This approach can be described as one of the key design approach that we adopt at Masdar. And in this diagram here, you see a hierarchy of how we think about design, which leads to this sustainable community. In the idea of sustainability, we always talk about the three pillars of sustainability: environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and economic sustainability. Right? We found through working for more than a decade that in order to optimize these pillars, right, the approach that is described here is one of the approaches that can lead us to successful solutions. So first of all, we think about passive design and passive measures. These are the big architectural moves when we think about how we arrange our cities, how we arrange the streets, what is those patterns, streets that give rise to not only people movement, but also how the wind movement actually works through the city in order to cool the city. This also a passive measure dealing with the shapes and masses allows us to move the building closer together and how to optimize relationship of buildings to each other. So it is over and above this designing a single building. It's the collective that is most important here when we're adopting a passive measured approach. And only when you optimize all these passive measures, then we start thinking about the active measures that we deal with buildings. And here comes some of the technologies of applying energy and water efficient technologies, how we deal with our waste systems, the controls that you add to your building to optimize what is a good foundation that is being provided by the passive approach in the first place. And only when these two areas are fully optimized, then we think about offsetting some of the resource uses by the use of geothermal, wind, or PV panels. In our particular case, PV panels is the one of choice, simply because the wind level and the geothermal that is available is limited for our specific location in Masdar City. From the design approach, you see here some examples of what we have produced. This specific building is the Mohammed bin Zayed University for Artificial Intelligence. But within this backdrop, you see a lot of public realm areas that are well shaded by the buildings. They're not only the shaded streets, but you can see there are a number of courtyard typology that's coming into play. We are using the wind to cool down some of the streets. You can see some water feature for evaporative cooling on the image at the center bottom as well. And even in the more private realm, the buildings are working together to provide as much comfort as they can to these surrounding outdoor areas. This particular example is a LEED Platinum Eco Residence building. It's a home to 900 people spread across 500 apartments. This is an interesting study we did a while back, just to compare the impact of buildings shading the street compared to an area where the buildings are pulled back away from the street. You can see that there's a big difference with these surface temperature, or what we call the radiant temperature of these surfaces. Now, this radiant temperature has a direct impact on the feeling of comfort when you use these spaces. So being able to control the radiant temperature of surfaces is one of the steps one can take to improve environmental comfort to the users. However, shading itself is not enough in our particular case in Masdar City. And that's simply because the overall temperature across the year is high or could be described as extremely high here. Whereas in the winter months, there is a good level of comfort, but between April to October, you can see that the heat stress that occurs at Masdar City is extremely high. So when it comes to our public realm within Masdar City, and here's the example of Central Park, you can see a lot of moves here to provide a level of shading. These shadings, as I mentioned earlier, helps, but nevertheless, temperature still remains high. So as a result, parks like Central Park and Masdar City, they are very well used within the winter months. But when it comes to the summer months, people tend to stay away because of the temperature. And even in a public plaza, this particular example is what we call Eco Residence 2 Plaza. It's designed for a lot of outdoor activities and even gathering events. Again, in the winter, areas like this works really, really well. And come the summer, the people tend to stay away for the very same reasons I described earlier. So let's just remind ourselves what are those factors that provide human comfort in the outdoor areas. And here are some listed points that has that specific impact, from air temperature to air humidity, wind movement, direct and indirect radiation, and of course, not least, activity, actually what you're doing, and the clothing that you are wearing. There's this point to keep in mind when we start thinking about more holistically how to improve outdoor comfort. So from that, Masdar is calling for solutions of basically how we can provide something for the citizens to enjoy the outdoors, even during the summer daytime when the temperature is really high. Points to bear in mind to make this a practical solution and something that fits in within the overall mission of Masdar City being a sustainable development are listed here, from the cost effectiveness, taking care of the materials that you use. Again, talking about the passive and active measures as referred to in the triangle I described earlier. And a point about power. We recognize that you want to produce some cooling, there may be some power involved. But we would like to think about these solutions as something that potentially is transferable or movable. So if it comes to power, there will be a preference from something that is from a renewable source. Because it's also for the outdoors, we're not producing a building or an enclosed room here. So this core is for something that works in outdoors. You are still in outdoors, or at the very least, it is a semi-enclosed outdoor structure. Ease of maintenance, because this is a real life proposition. So to be able to remain it for the years to come, extremely possible. And as I mentioned earlier, the idea that we can move it from place to place within Masdar City would be highly desirable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wan, for the detailed presentation. May I invite you to be back on screen for the next segment on Q&A. Okay, let me just pull out. We have a few questions that has been listed. Just give me a second while I pull out some of these questions. Okay. For Masdar, is there a targeted temperature to reach or a preferred temperature for the cooling solution?
There is no specific temperature to actually reach, and I like to make reference to those various factors that's mentioned in the presentation about achieving human comfort. We found that the best human comfort is a combination of factors, of which the air temperature is one of them. We are thinking about it practically. This is still outdoors, and temperature humidities are high. So the solution is to find to build a place or a semi-enclosed structure that improves the comfort. We're looking for some way to improve, almost like a refuge, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. And the second question would be, would Masdar consider evaporative cooling or mist cooling solution, which involves the use of potable water?
The type of solution we have in mind is still remains to be transferable, right? And because we do not have exact locations, and these locations may even change through different times of the year, there would be no direct connection to the grid with potable water. If there's any water technologies that's to be incorporated, it must be self-contained.
Thank you. And another question, I hope I got this correct. Could you please clarify the requirement on this portability, which I believe means to transfer? Is it by the user or city worker?
The portability will be by the city worker. It will be done through our facility management. Because the size I was referring to that sits in the area, approximately 2 by 3 square meters. That's just a rough guideline. The idea that it can be lifted onto a back of a transporter and relocated is what we have in mind.
Thank you.
Done by us.
Thank you. And the next question is on, are you looking for new standalone structures for active shading, or can this be in combination of the existing structure?
Our preference for this particular core is something that is independent and stands by itself. Part of the reason I think it's easier to manage and to get those technologies in, rather than reliant on what is built in the urban fabric at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, are there any LOT sensors already deployed within the community currently, which the solutions providers can integrate with?
There are currently no sensors in our public realm areas.
Thank you. The next one is on the cooling systems and aircon. Is there an estimation of how much water is being used for the cooling system?
No.
Okay, this one, let me just, okay, this is more so as a reference. So for the solutions that has already been implemented in Masdar, what are some of these solutions that have been tried but are not suitable? And what are some of these that has done well and are currently implemented?
If we are specifically referencing to this core about comfort in the outdoor realm, we have tried many forms of shading. We can say that light shading, when we're using fabric, does not work well because the light structure heats up very quickly and the heat goes through. So the heavier shading systems tend to work. The best cooled system are the areas actually cooled by the buildings. Of course, the buildings is very, very massive structure. Right? So this is just about the shading. Higher mass improves cooling, keep the surfaces cool. However, I'd like to expand that for this particular core. We are looking at the other comfort factors. And one area I'd like to point at in the summer months, not only is temperature high, but the humidity is very high as well. right? And we do not have currently any solutions to deal with humidity. So I'll be very interested to look forward to solutions that can temper some of the humidity as well, combined with the other factors of comfort.
Thank you. And our next question, would Masdar consider a different type of construction material to address the issue on a more general basis instead of a refuge or pod concept? Are you open to other concept of construction materials rather than just a refuge or a pod?
We're totally open to exploring whatever materials out there. As I say, it's the idea of innovation. Just be mindful that when we are dealing with buildings, we do track our embodied carbon in the construction of our buildings. So we did not state that in this core, but one has to take a sensible approach and not use materials that may incur a very high carbon footprint.
Thank you. And earlier on, we mentioned about the portability. So if some of the solution providers are thinking about geothermal, will this solution then fit with the challenge?
I would not recommend using geothermal at Masdar City. We have done some experiments with geothermal and found that it has not been economically viable to date. If someone can come forward to demonstrate otherwise, because those experiments were done a while ago, we'd be happy to explore.
And we have one that is asking on what is the average wind speed during the hot summer?
I did not know that at the top of my head. Unfortunately, I've asked that question by email, but I fully believe that that information is also available on his observatory data online.
Sure, we can always get back to them on our challenge portal.
Yes, but on average, the wind speed is generally relatively low in this particular location within Abu Dhabi. And hence that's why we tend to use solar much more than wind. There are no wind turbines at Masdar City for this reason.
Great. And in the event of a successful POC, would the solutions provider be collaborating with a local company, or is it required for the solutions provider to actually set up a team within Abu Dhabi? So after a successful POC,
I believe that well, first of all, obviously the answer is dependent on the nature of the solution. So we need to take a practical approach, right? Where we are open to both ways. Of course, we can understand why someone wants to work with somebody locally, especially if there's someone's related to the potential permitting processes that might be involved, for example. So we are happy to hear the proposed idea of how the collaboration might work. And of course, through our experience here, we will turn it into a practical roadmap.
Thank you. Okay, we have one question on did Masdar conduct any study regarding urban heat island? And if yes, what were the outcomes?
Urban heat island, we have done...
Urgan, sorry, URGAN, if I got that correct.
URGAN. I'm not sure what that term means. Maybe it's a typo. It's urban heat island. If that is the case, yes, we do have issues with urban heat island effect there. Last studies done was, I would say, actually a decade ago, and which led rise to this heavily shaded, close compact buildings where the heat from top is ejected in a way. We have not censored this, measured with sensors, just done computer modeling.
And will Masdar consider an approach similar to Singapore, where most of the buildings are connected to a central heating system?
A central
cooling system, sorry.
We do have a district cooling system here where all our buildings is connected to. But this solution, as I mentioned earlier, is a standalone solution. So we are proposing that this solution is not connected to our district cooling system. It functions independently.
And in the case for Masdar City, is the environment completely non-conducive to any vegetation? This is based on the context of structures like composite green roofs or facades. So is it completely without any greenery?
We do have greenery at Masdar City. It's limited, and the reason being is we have very low amount of rainfall, very low. So greenery relies upon irrigation. Right? So we use irrigation, of course, very conservatively for very select areas. But this is not to say that we will not consider greenery if it's part of within the self-contained system, and in the realm of hydroponics, for example.
Our next question, is Masdar looking to integrate sustainable urban mobility through this challenge or any other initiatives?
This core is not related to mobility solutions, and we do have ongoing mobility development at Masdar City, from autonomous vehicles to full electric vehicles, understanding their impact in this high heat environment we're in. So that is definitely in our city. We're not asking for this solution to be integrated with that though.
Okay, perhaps we have time for one or two more last questions. Okay, I have one over here. Is Masdar able to accept or would consider any solutions that requires connectivity to the power grid?
Our preference is not to connect to the power grid, because when we move it around, we cannot guarantee that there will be a nearby connection. So it's the idea that it is standalone, and also if it's standalone, it will make this a much more practical solution, not only within Masdar City, but could be in the future expanded to the rest of Abu Dhabi.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
I'd remind that it's about tempering the solution.
Understand. Thank you. Thank you so much for being so patient with all our questions. Thank you again for your time, and thank you so much for all the participants being so active with all the questions. Should we have not addressed your questions, not to worry, we will definitely be providing our responses onto the challenge portal towards the end of June.